John's spaceship had crashed into the alien planet with an explosion that rocked his body and rattled the control panel. He had been a soldier on a routine mission, traveling through the stars when something went wrong, very wrong. The ship was a mess. Sparks flew from broken wires, and the smell of burnt metal filled the air. Groaning, John slowly unbuckled himself from the pilot's seat. His body ached, but he had to survive. He needed to get out of there. The hull of the ship was torn open, and smoke poured out of the gaps. He had to move fast before the whole thing exploded. Stepping onto the surface of the alien planet, John gasped. The sky above was a strange shade of purple, and the ground under his feet seemed to pulse with life, glowing faintly in the dim light. There was no sign of any other life in sight, but John had learned to trust his instincts. Something was off. He took a deep breath and looked around. He had no idea where he was. The only thing he knew was that he needed to find shelter and contact his commanders. But the planet seemed strange, almost like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As John walked, he noticed something odd in the distance. A structure, something that didn't look natural. It was built into the side of a mountain, hidden by thick trees and vines. The entrance was barely visible, as though it had been purposely concealed. John felt a chill run down his spine. The feeling that something wasn't right grew stronger. But he couldn't just stand there. He had to find a way out of this mess. Maybe this mysterious building could offer him some answers. His curiosity led him toward the entrance. He was careful to step lightly, not wanting to make a sound. But the closer he got, the more the strange feeling gripped him. It was as if the ground was pulling him toward it, as though the very air was charged with energy. Suddenly, John heard a rustle behind him. He spun around, his hand instinctively going to the weapon at his side. His heart raced, but all he saw was the wind stirring the leaves. Nothing was there. Still on edge, John turned back to the bunker and continued his approach. The entrance was narrow, hidden behind thick vines, and when he pushed them aside, a cold rush of air hit his face. He stepped inside, and his eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light. The inside of the bunker was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The walls were smooth, like they were made of some kind of metal that didn't exist in human technology. Strange. Markings were etched into the surfaces, glowing faintly with a soft blue light. The air smelled of something sweet, almost floral, mixed with the scent of something metallic. "Hello," John called out cautiously, his voice echoing through the empty space. His eyes scanned the area, but he saw nothing, just the strange walls and the faint glow. He took another step forward, his boots making soft thuds against the floor. As he moved deeper into the bunker, he heard a rustling noise from the shadows. Someone was in there with him. Before he could react, a hand shot out from the darkness and grabbed his wrist with an iron grip. John gasped, his heart leaping into his throat. He tried to pull away, but the hand held firm. "Psst, you're a man?" a voice whispered urgently. John's mind raced. The voice was light, feminine, and foreign, yet somehow familiar. He was about to fight back when he noticed the figure that had pulled him into the shadows. A girl, an alien girl, to be precise. She looked human, but her skin had a strange, shimmering quality to it. Her eyes glowed a deep, vibrant purple, and her hair, silver like moonlight, cascaded down her back. She was small, but her grip was strong. What are you?" John managed to choke out, still trying to free his wrist from her grasp. His mind was struggling to catch up with what was happening. She stared at him, almost in disbelief, and then whispered again, You're a man?" John's mind raced. Yes, I'm a man," he said, his voice tight with confusion. "Who are you? What is this place?" The girl's grip loosened, but she didn't let go. "Come with me," she said, pulling him deeper into the bunker. John was too stunned to protest. He had no choice but to follow her, his curiosity now fully piqued. What did she mean? You're a man? And why had she pulled him into this strange place? The deeper they went, the more John realized that the bunker wasn't empty. There were other people, or more accurately, other beings moving in the shadows, watching him as he walked past. The girl stopped in front of a large door at the center of the bunker. She turned to face him, and her expression was serious. "You need to understand something," she said. "You're not just any man. You're here for a reason. And it's not just about you." John frowned, trying to make sense of her words. "What do you mean?" he asked. But before she could answer, the door in front of them slid open with a soft hiss. John stepped into the room, but he was no longer alone. The eyes of 1,000 women were fixed on him, their gazes sharp and curious. And John knew, without a doubt, that this was only the beginning. John stood frozen in the doorway, his breath caught in his chest. The room before him was enormous, filled with rows of women. They weren't just any women. They were alien, with glowing skin and hair that shimmered like silver threads woven into the night sky. Their eyes, glowing a soft violet, followed his every move. It was as though they had never seen a man before, and in that moment, John felt like the center of their universe. The girl who had pulled him in stood beside him now, her hand still gently gripping his arm. She gave him a reassuring glance before stepping forward, her voice steady. "This is the last sanctuary," she said. "This is the home of the Vazarians." John's mind raced. The name Vazar didn't mean anything to him. Were these aliens? And if so, why were they all women? What was he doing here? As if sensing his confusion, the girl spoke again, her words soft but filled with urgency. "You are here because you are the key to our survival. You must understand, we've been waiting for you." John's heart beat faster. Waiting for him? 1,000 alien women in a hidden bunker, waiting for a man to show up? He felt dizzy. The whole situation was surreal, impossible to grasp. "What do you mean by waiting?" he asked, trying to sound calm, though the rising panic in his chest made it hard to keep his voice steady. The girl turned to face him, her violet eyes locking onto his. We have been without men for centuries," she said quietly. "The Vazarians, our race, has been dying. No men have been born for generations. We are a dying people." John blinked, trying to make sense of the words. A race without men? It didn't make any sense. The Vazarians looked human, but they were clearly not from Earth. Their features were just too perfect, too otherworldly. But. "I'm just a soldier," he protested, his voice filled with disbelief. "I don't even know where I am. What do you want me to do?" The girl took a deep breath. "You are not just any soldier, John," she said, her voice full of meaning. "The prophecy spoke of a man who would come to us. The last man, the one who would save us and restore what has been lost." John felt his chest tighten. A prophecy? Was this some kind of sick joke? How could he, a simple human soldier, have anything to do with saving a dying alien race? "You're saying that I am the one who can save you?" he asked, still struggling. "To understand," the girl nodded. "Yes, you are the one who can restore our species. You are the man who will bring back what we've lost, the ability to reproduce, to thrive once more." John felt the room spinning. It wasn't just the sheer ridiculousness of it all, it was the weight of their words. These women, these aliens, had been without men for so long that they had turned to myths, to prophecies, to wait for a man like him. And now, here he was. But how could he be the one to save them? Before John could process this new information, a voice rang out across the room. A tall woman, standing near the center, stepped forward. Her skin was a shimmering gold, and her eyes glowed brighter than any of the others. She had an aura of authority about her. "Why should we trust him?" the woman asked, her voice calm but sharp. What makes him different from the other men who've arrived before him? The girl who had brought John inside Arlia looked at the woman with a mixture of defiance and sadness. Because he's the one, Arlia said simply. The prophecy foretold a soldier, a warrior who would be both strong and kind, who would restore balance. John is that soldier. The golden-skinned woman studied John for a long moment, her gaze unwavering. John felt the pressure of 1,000 eyes watching him. He was no longer just a soldier, he was a symbol, a prophecy come to life. But how can he help us? The woman asked, her voice softer now, almost pleading. If we cannot reproduce, if we are trapped in this bunker with no future, what does this man bring that will save us? Arlia looked at John, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite read. We need him to restore our genetic diversity, she explained. Our race cannot survive without men. We need him to help us rebuild. John felt the weight of her words sink in, and for the first time, he realized the gravity of the situation. These women, this alien race, had been struggling for so long. They had lived in isolation, waiting, hoping for a savior. But even if he was the man the prophecy spoke of, what could he do? He was just one man, and he had no idea how to help. Another woman, with eyes like silver orbs, stepped forward, her voice calm but filled with doubt. What if he's not the one? What if he cannot do what we need him to do? Arlia stepped in front of John, her expression fierce. He is the one. He is all we have. The golden-skinned woman nodded slowly. Then let's see if he truly is the one who will save us. With those words, the room fell into a tense silence. John knew that he was caught in something far bigger than he could comprehend. The weight of their expectations hung heavy on him, and as he looked around at the women, each one staring at him with a mixture of hope and desperation, he realized that he was no longer just a soldier. He was something far more important. And whether he liked it or not, his actions from this moment on would determine the future of an entire race. Asterisk. The air in the bunker felt thick with tension as John stood before the gathering of women, all eyes fixed on him. He could feel the weight of their gaze, a mix of hope, curiosity, and uncertainty. He wasn't sure how he had become the center of this strange world, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was the key to something far greater than himself. Arlia, the girl who had brought him into this world, stood beside him. Her eyes, glowing like violet flames, were locked onto him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. She didn't look away. The silence in the room was deafening. A low murmur started among the women. Some whispered to each other in their alien language, while others studied John with calculating eyes. He felt like an exhibit in a zoo, something to be examined, probed, and ultimately judged. You are the one, Arlia finally spoke, her voice breaking through the murmur. The one we've been waiting for. The prophecy spoke of a man who would come when our world was on the brink, when all hope seemed lost. And you, John, are that man. John took a step back, still trying to understand what was happening. Wait, he said, holding up his hands in confusion. I don't even know what's going on here. I'm just a soldier. I'm not a hero. I'm not a prophecy. The words sounded hollow to him as they left his mouth. Could it really be true? Could he, just a man, be the answer to the survival of an entire alien race? His mind spun with the thought. It seemed like a bad dream. Arlia, sensing his hesitation, stepped closer, her voice softer now. The prophecy is older than time itself. It was told to us long ago by the elders. They spoke of a time when we would be at our lowest, when the last of our people would be left without hope. They foretold of a warrior one who would come, bringing balance to our broken world. John swallowed hard, trying to process the weight of her words. But why me? Why now? Arlia paused, her violet eyes flickering with an emotion John couldn't place. Because you are the last of your kind. There are no others left, John. You are the only man left in this universe, and we are the only women. The prophecy didn't just say a man would come. It said that you would come a soldier, a warrior, someone who could carry the legacy of both our worlds. John stared at her, his chest tightening. He had known isolation before being a soldier in the farthest reaches of space. But this was something else. He was being asked to become the cornerstone of an entire race's future. And yet, he felt completely out of place. He had no training for this, no knowledge of alien cultures, no idea what he was supposed to do. The golden-skinned woman, who had spoken before, now approached, her expression serious. "You think we've waited all these years for nothing?" The elders spoke of this moment, but we didn't know how long we would have to wait. We thought it was a dream, a myth. But now you're here, and our survival depends on you. The weight of her words hit John like a punch to the gut. These women, this alien race, had spent generations without men. The pain of their extinction loomed over them like a shadow, and they had waited, fought, and believed in this prophecy. And now, it was on his shoulders. Could he really do this? Do you understand? Arlia asked, her voice low and urgent. You are the one who will restore us. You are the last chance for our people. Our entire race depends on your actions. It's in your hands. John opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He couldn't understand how something like this could be real. It felt like a trap, a misunderstanding. He wasn't a savior. He was just a man, a soldier who had been unlucky enough to crash on a strange planet. What did he know about saving an entire species? Just as he was about to voice his doubts, a soft voice interrupted him. It was the silver-eyed woman from earlier, the one who had questioned his place in this world. She stepped forward, her eyes softer now, as if the hardness in her voice had vanished. Arlia speaks the truth, she said. You have no idea how long we've waited for you, how many generations have passed in hope. Our species has struggled, and we have lived in isolation, cut off from everything. We cannot survive like this any longer. John looked at her, a sense of urgency creeping into his chest. But I'm not the man you think I am, he said, his voice cracking under the weight of the situation. I don't have any special powers. I'm just a guy who got lost in space. You are special, Arlia said, her voice filled with conviction. You're the only one who can save us. You might not know it yet, but you're the key too. Our future. The words lingered in the air like a heavy fog. John was still struggling to grasp what they meant. He had no idea how to help them, no clue what he was supposed to do. But the way they looked at him, the way they were clinging to him, it was impossible to ignore. A murmur spread across the room, the women talking amongst themselves. John could feel their hopes rising, their anticipation thick in the air. But as much as he wanted to run from this responsibility, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was exactly where he needed to be. He was the last man in the universe, and somehow he was supposed to bring their race back from the brink of extinction. Tell me what I need to do, John said finally, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Arlia smiled, but it wasn't a smile of relief. It was the smile of someone who knew that the true journey was only just beginning. You will help us rebuild, she said softly. But first, you must understand the truth about our people and about the power you hold. John nodded, his mind still a whirlwind. There was no turning back now. He had been pulled into a world he didn't understand, and whether he was ready or not, the future of an entire race depended on him. And as Arlia led him deeper into the bunker, he knew that the prophecy was only the beginning. The real test was about to begin. The deeper John ventured into the bunker, the more he realized that this place was not just a refuge, it was a labyrinth of secrets, each hidden in plain sight. The women of the Vazar race moved in silence, their eyes occasionally glancing at him as he walked alongside Arlia. She had been quiet for a while, her earlier confidence replaced with something else, a quiet intensity, as if she too was Processing the reality of what was happening, John tried to make sense of everything. These women had been living in isolation for centuries, unable to reproduce naturally. They had survived by relying on artificial methods, but they knew their time was running out. The Visarians were a dying race. He was their last hope, and yet he had no idea what role he was supposed to play. The walls of the bunker were lined with strange technology, systems he had never seen before. The corridors were narrow, but as they moved deeper, John noticed that the structure seemed to stretch infinitely. There were chambers filled with scientific equipment, rooms where women sat alone, their heads bowed in concentration, working on data terminals. It was like a mixture of a hospital, a research facility, and something much more personal. "Why haven't you just left this place?" John asked, breaking the silence. He was still trying to understand. Why stay hidden in this underground shelter if there was a whole universe out there? Why not search for other civilizations, other species who might help? Arlia glanced at him, her eyes softening. "We cannot leave," she explained, her voice quiet but firm. "We've tried. The outside world is too dangerous. The disease ... it ravaged our people long ago. It wiped out all the males, and we've been trapped here ever since, afraid to venture out." John felt a pang of sympathy, but at the same time, he couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of responsibility. They had been waiting for him, waiting for a man to save them. It felt like too much. As they walked, Arlia led him into a large central chamber that was unlike anything John had seen before. The walls were lined with what appeared to be vast screens, each one displaying complex genetic data, biological maps, and what looked like various forms of medical research. In the center of the room stood a large, cylindrical structure, surrounded by holographic displays. John took a hesitant step forward. "What is all this?" he asked, eyes wide with curiosity. "This is the heart of our research," Arlia explained. "It's where we've been working to find a way to restore our species. We've been using artificial means to reproduce, but it's not enough. The genetic pool is too small. We've exhausted our options, and now ... double quote. She paused, her voice lowering. "Now we need you." John felt a knot form in his stomach. "What do you mean? What's in here?" Arlia stepped aside, revealing a glass chamber inside the cylindrical structure. The glass was frosted over, but John could make out the shape of something or someone inside. "This," she said softly, "is our last hope." John stepped closer, his eyes wide with disbelief. Inside the chamber was a figure. But it wasn't like any woman he had seen before. The woman, or whatever she was suspended in a strange translucent fluid, connected to various machines and tubes. She looked almost human, but there was something alien about her. Her skin was a pale, almost glowing white, and her features were smooth, almost flawless. Her hair floated around her head like strands of silver light. John's heart raced. "What is she?" he asked, unable to tear his gaze away. "This is our last attempt to save our species," Arlia said, her voice filled with emotion. "We've been working to create a viable offspring from the genetic material we have left, but it's not enough. She is our final attempt." John turned to her, confusion written on his face. "What do you mean, she's the last attempt?" Arlia took a deep breath, her eyes filled with sadness. "She is a prototype, an experiment. We've tried to combine our DNA with yours. John, we've done everything we can to make this work, but it's not perfect. She's what we hope will be our future, a child born of both our races." John stared at the suspended figure in the chamber, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was hearing. These women had been trying to create a new generation of Visarians using their own DNA combined with human genetic material, and now he was being told that this child might be their future? "But why me?" John asked again, his voice shaky. "I'm just a soldier. I'm not a scientist. I don't know anything about this. Arlia's expression softened, and she took a step toward him. Because you are the only man left. Your genetic material is the key to saving us, John. We need you to help us continue the race. Without you, there's no hope. John felt like the ground was being pulled out from beneath him. How could this be real? He was a soldier trained for war, not to be some kind of genetic savior for an entire species. The idea of becoming a symbol of hope for these women was overwhelming. But as he looked at the fragile form inside the chamber, he saw the desperation in Arlia's eyes. He saw the years of struggle, the quiet desperation of a race on the brink of extinction. Are you asking me to father a child with one of you? John asked, his voice low. Arlia nodded slowly. Yes, we need your genetic contribution to save us. You are the bridge between our two species, John. Without you, we have nothing. John closed his eyes for a moment, trying to push back the panic rising in his chest. This wasn't the mission he had signed up for. He wasn't prepared for this kind of responsibility, for the weight of an entire race's future on his shoulders. He opened his eyes again, focusing on the figure in the chamber. And for the first time, something shifted inside him, a recognition of the gravity of his situation. This wasn't about him anymore. This wasn't about whether he was ready or not. It was about survival. And these women, these aliens were depending on him to make it happen. He took a deep breath and nodded. All right. I'll help, he said quietly, though his voice trembled. Arlia gave him a small relieved smile, but there was no joy in it. It was a smile of acceptance, of knowing that the future of her people, for better or worse, rested on his shoulders. The days following John's agreement to help the Vizarians felt like a blur. The bunker, once a quiet place of research and survival, now seemed charged with energy, as if the weight of their future was finally pressing down on everyone. Women moved through the halls with purpose, some with hopeful expressions, others with more guarded, skeptical looks. The air was thick with expectation, and John couldn't shake the feeling that everything he did was being watched, evaluated, and weighed against the prophecy. He had agreed to be a part of their future, to help ensure the survival of their race. But every time he walked through the corridors, every time he saw the hopeful faces of the women, it became clearer that he was no longer just a man. He was their symbol, someone they had waited centuries for, and the pressure was almost unbearable. Days were long and filled with meetings, discussions, and experiments. Arlia, the one person who seemed to trust him above all others, guided him through their culture, explaining their biology, their history, and the genetics they had been working to combine. But despite their work, John still didn't feel like he was getting any closer to understanding why he was so important, why he was the one who had to save them. He was still just a soldier, a man with no extraordinary powers, no scientific knowledge. And yet, here he was, at the center of their hopes. One evening, as John walked through the main hall of the bunker, he overheard a conversation that caught his attention. Two women were talking quietly in the corner, their voices low but intense. He can't be the one of them whispered, her face shadowed in doubt. We don't know anything about him. He's just a soldier, and he's human. How could he possibly save us? The other woman nodded, her expression grim. I agree. We've put all our faith in this prophecy, but what if we're wrong? What if he's not the one we've been waiting for? What if our salvation is just a dream? John paused, a chill running through him. He knew there had to be dissent. There was no way that everyone in the bunker would blindly accept him as their savior. But hearing their doubts voiced so plainly shook him in a way he hadn't expected. He knew that the prophecy was supposed to be their guiding light, but he wasn't sure he believed in it either. Could he really restore their race? He was just a man, caught in the middle of a story that didn't seem real. As he turned to leave, he was stopped by Arlia, who had been watching from a distance. Her eyes were filled with concern, but she hid it well. I heard what they said. John said quietly, trying to keep his voice neutral. There are others who doubt me. They think I'm not the one. They think I can't save you all. Arlia placed a hand on his arm, her touch soft but firm. There will always be doubt, she said, her voice low. When you're dealing with something as important as the survival of a race, doubt is inevitable. But you have to remember, John, that you are our last hope. We have nothing else. John nodded, though the weight of her words felt heavier than ever. He didn't want to let them down. He didn't want to fail them. But the doubts in his mind continued to grow, and they weren't easily shaken. Over the next few days, the tension in the bunker grew. It wasn't just the whispers of doubt. There were also the quiet rebellions, small acts of defiance from those who didn't want to rely on the prophecy. Some began to question the necessity of having John involved in their reproduction process at all. Others believed the women should find their own way to rebuild their race without the intervention of a human male. The final straw came one evening when a group of women, led by the golden-skinned leader from earlier, approached John with a proposition. We've heard enough, she said, her voice strong and unyielding. We've been trying to make this work for so long, but we can't keep waiting on some myth to save us. The prophecy doesn't define us. We define our future. John stood still, his heart pounding in his chest. What are you saying? He asked, his voice tight with anxiety. We're taking control of our future, the woman continued, her eyes hard. We don't need you. We don't need a human to restore us. We've made our own progress, and we're going to keep trying. Without you. John felt the ground shift beneath him. This wasn't just a difference of opinion. It was a direct challenge to everything he had been asked to do. These women, who had once seen him as their savior, were now rejecting him. What happens now? John asked, his voice barely a whisper. We don't know, the woman replied, her tone softening, though it remained firm. But we are done depending on a prophecy. It's time for us to take our fate into our own hands. John stood there speechless. The room felt cold, and for the first time, he truly felt alone in this place. He had thought he was part of something important, that his involvement would bring change. But now it seemed that even the very people he was supposed to save were turning against him. Arlia, who had been watching from the shadows, stepped forward, her face filled with a mixture of regret and understanding. She had known this moment would come. She had always known there would be resistance, but it still hurt to see it play out so quickly. John, she said softly, this was bound to happen. Not everyone will agree with the prophecy, and not everyone will accept what you represent. But you are still the key to our survival. Don't let them convince you otherwise. He turned to her, his eyes filled with confusion and frustration. But if they don't believe in me, if they don't want me here, what am I supposed to do? Arlia looked at him, her gaze steady. You have to decide if you're willing to fight for us, John. For all of us. If you give up now, then everything will truly be lost. But if you stand strong, if you choose to fight, then you might just prove the prophecy right. John stood in silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air. He knew she was right. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the future of a race, the survival of a people who had waited for centuries for a savior who might not even exist. And now, more than ever, it was up to him to decide whether he would accept the challenge or let the prophecy crumble into dust. The days following the rebellion were filled with tension, and John couldn't shake the feeling that everything was unraveling. The Vazarians, the women who had once welcomed him with open arms, were now divided. The prophecy, which had once been their guiding light, was now a source of division. Some wanted to continue believing in it, while others, led by the golden-skinned woman, felt that they had to rely on themselves. And John, the very man at the center of their hopes, now found himself questioning his place in this strange world. Arlia, the one constant in this chaotic new world, had told him not to give up. She believed in him, even when others didn't. But as he looked around at the faces of the women who no longer trusted him, John wasn't sure if he could keep going. Was he really the savior they needed? Or was he just a symbol of their last hope, a misplaced legend? It wasn't long before the women who still believed in the prophecy approached John with a proposition. They had decided that if he was going to be the one to restore their species, he would have to prove it. The tests, they said, would show whether he had the strength, the will, and the heart to lead them. He had to prove himself not just in word, but in action. Are you ready to prove you are the one? Arlia asked him, her eyes filled with determination. She was standing beside him as they entered a large chamber at the heart of the bunker, the same one where he had seen the genetic research. But this time, the air felt heavier, filled with anticipation. John nodded, though a part of him was filled with doubt. What kind of tests were they planning? And more importantly, could he pass them? Arlia stepped forward and addressed the gathered women. The tests will begin now. John must face trials that will test both his physical and mental strength. These trials are not just about surviving. They are about proving his worth. If he is truly the one, he will succeed. The golden-skinned woman stepped forward, her expression still stern. We have no more time for waiting. The future of our species depends on what happens here. If John fails, then we will have no choice but to abandon the prophecy and find another way. But if he succeeds... She looked at John, her gaze piercing. We will follow him, no matter where he leads. John's heart pounded in his chest. The stakes had never been higher. His failure wasn't just a personal defeat, it would mean the end of the Vizar race, the end of their hope for survival. The first trial was a physical one. The women led him to a vast arena-like chamber, its walls lined with strange glowing runes that pulsed with energy. The floor was covered in a soft, yet firm, material that seemed to shift beneath his feet. At the center of the room stood a massive mechanical creature, a towering beast with sharp claws and glowing eyes, a machine designed to test his strength. You must defeat this, Arlia said, her voice calm but filled with an edge of urgency. This creature is an advanced combat unit, designed to test the strength and skill of any who would challenge it. If you are the one, you will defeat it. John took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had fought in countless battles before, but this was different. This wasn't a human enemy. This was a machine, a test of his strength, but also of his instincts. The creature moved, its massive limbs shifting with an eerie precision. Its eyes glowed a deep red, and its metallic body hummed with energy as it prepared to strike. John didn't hesitate. He charged, dodging the creature's massive claws as they slashed through the air. His heart was pounding, his muscles screaming. With effort, but he fought through the pain. This wasn't just about winning, it was about proving that he could survive, that he could protect them. The creature lunged at him, but John was faster. He ducked beneath its strike, and using every ounce of his training, he delivered a powerful punch to its core. The creature staggered, its red eyes flickering as sparks flew from its joints. But it was far from over. John wasn't just fighting. For his life, he was fighting for something much bigger. He was fighting for the women who had placed their hopes in him, for a race that was depending on him to succeed. With one final brutal strike, John brought the creature to the ground. It collapsed with a loud crash, its glowing eyes flickering out as it powered down. The room was silent for a moment, and then slowly, the women began to clap. Arlia stepped forward, her face filled with pride. You have proven your strength, John, but this is only the first test. The trials will only get harder from here. John nodded, trying to catch his breath, but he could feel the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. The first test was over, but the real battle was just beginning. The second trial was not physical, but mental. The golden-skinned woman, who had once been his greatest critic, now stood before him, her face calm and serious. You must solve a puzzle, she said, motioning to a large device in the center of the room. It was a complex, multi-layered structure, its surface covered in intricate patterns and shifting symbols. "This device is the key to our genetic research," she continued. "It contains the data needed to revive our species. If you can unlock it, then you will prove not only your strength but your intellect as well." John studied the device, the symbols twisting in his mind. It wasn't just a puzzle, it was a test of his ability to think under pressure, to make the right choices when everything felt impossible. Minutes stretched into hours as John worked through the puzzle, his hands moving quickly as he adjusted the shifting patterns. He had been trained to think critically, but this was unlike any puzzle he had ever encountered. Each move felt like it could be his last chance to prove that he was worthy. Finally, with a soft click, the device clicked open. The symbols shifted and revealed a glowing, intricate design, a map of the Vasar's genetic history. John stepped back, exhausted but triumphant. He had passed the second test. But he knew this was far from over. There were still more trials to come, and each one would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. As the women began to murmur in approval, John's resolve hardened. He had come this far. And no matter how difficult the trials ahead were, he would face them. Because if he didn't, everything they had fought for, the future of the Vasar race, would be lost. The real test was just beginning. And John was ready. The final trial had arrived. John stood at the edge of a massive chamber, his muscles aching from the previous tests. His body had been pushed to its limits, but his mind felt sharp, more focused than ever. He had survived the battles and solved the puzzles, but now standing before the final challenge, John knew that the stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just about proving his worth to the Vasarians anymore. This wasn't about surviving the tests or meeting the prophecy's demands. The future of an entire species rested in his hands, and he had no idea what the final trial would be. What more could they ask of him? Arlia, who had been his guide through this strange and overwhelming world, stood by his side. Her eyes, usually filled with confidence, were now filled with something else. Fear. Not for herself, but for her people. She had believed in the prophecy in John, but now even she seemed uncertain. "John," Arlia whispered, her voice barely audible. "This is it. The final trial will determine everything. If you succeed, the future of our species will be secured. If you fail... John could feel the weight of her words pressing on his chest. Failure wasn't an option. But how could he succeed when he still didn't understand everything about the Vasarians or their society? The golden-skinned woman who had opposed him in the past approached. There was no defiance in her expression. Now only a quiet respect. "You've come far, John. You've proven yourself in ways we never imagined. But this last test will be the hardest. Are you ready?" John looked at the faces of the women surrounding him. They weren't just waiting for him to pass a test. They were waiting for him to secure their future. Every pair of eyes seemed to hold a plea, a silent request for something more than just survival. They wanted hope. They wanted a future. "I'm ready," he said, though his voice felt hollow. How could he be ready for something as monumental as this? The golden-skinned woman nodded and gestured to the center of the room. There, a strange altar-like structure stood, surrounded by glowing symbols and ancient markings that seemed to pulse with life. At the top of the altar, a small transparent pod lay, filled with a faint, glowing fluid. "This is the final step," the woman explained, her voice low. "This pod contains the essence of our race, our hope for the future. We've tried to create the perfect genetic combination to restore our species, but it requires something more. You." John swallowed hard. "What do you mean, requires something more? I don't understand." "The final test is not about strength or intellect," the golden-skinned woman continued. "It's about what you're willing to sacrifice. This pod contains the last of our viable genetic material. If you are to be the father of our future, you must bond with it. You must give a part of yourself to it, to ensure the survival of our people. John's heart pounded in his chest. He understood now. This wasn't just about becoming a father. This was about becoming the foundation of an entire race. It wasn't a choice, it was a responsibility he hadn't asked for, but one he had to accept if the Visarians were to survive. "I don't know if I can do this," he said quietly, the weight of the decision suffocating him. Arlia, who had been standing beside him, reached out and placed a hand on his arm. Her touch was warm and reassuring. "You have no choice, John. You are the one we've been waiting for. You've shown us your strength, your intellect, but now we need your heart. You need to give yourself fully to us. If you don't, we will die. If you do, we can rebuild." John looked at the pod. The essence of an entire race, their last chance for survival, rested in that small container. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and yet he knew he had no choice. Without a word, John stepped forward, his body heavy with uncertainty, but his resolve hardening. As he approached the altar, the pod seemed to glow brighter, as if welcoming him. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, but it didn't matter anymore. He wasn't just fighting for his life, he was fighting for their Zod. As he reached the pod, the symbols on the altar began to glow more intensely, the air around him crackling with energy. He could hear his heart beating in his ears, the silence in the room deafening. The golden-skinned woman stepped forward again. "You must bond with it, John. Only then can our race be reborn." John hesitated, then took a deep breath. He reached out and touched the pod. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through him, overwhelming his senses. He felt his body seize, as though it was being pulled apart and put back together again. The room seemed to dissolve around him, and in the space between his heartbeat, he saw flashes of the Visar race's history, memories of their past, their greatest triumphs and their darkest hours. He saw the women who had fought to survive, the mothers who had sacrificed everything for their children. He saw the pain of their extinction, the quiet desperation that had driven them to this moment. And through it all, he saw himself, an outsider, becoming something more. The pain in his body intensified, but so did the sense of connection. He wasn't just John anymore. He was becoming a part of something much larger than himself, something that transcended species and time. His breath quickened, and he could feel the bond forming, his essence merging with the genetic material, creating a new future for the Visarians. And then, as quickly as it had started, the energy subsided, and John collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. The room was silent. The women watched him, their eyes filled with awe and something else, hope. Arlian knelt beside him, her eyes filled with tears. "You did it," she whispered. "You've saved us." John looked up at her, his heart heavy but full. He had done. He had given everything, and in return, he had secured the future of a people who had waited for centuries for a savior. But as he looked around at the women who had once been strangers, he realized they were no longer strangers. They were his family, his people, his responsibility. The Visarians had a future now, and it was a future he would fight for, protect, and build with them. Because, in the end, it wasn't just about survival, it was about creating something worth fighting for. And together, they would rebuild.